Okay, so remember, we were at the part of the chapter where Ramona was excited to go to school, got to school, does not really like Howie. Howie does not really like Ramona. And Ramona won't move out of her chair because when she was asked to sit there, her teacher, Miss Benny, said to sit there for the present. We're going to find out what that really means. And we just had Miss Benny, they've done the song. First they learned where the bathroom was. Then they did the song, and then they did a story. And Ramona asked, how could Mike go to the bathroom? And here we go. Miss Benny's going to answer the question now. Boys and girls, she began. Now remember, we don't say that anymore because boys and girls is pretty limiting, so we just say kids. And spoke in her clear, distinct way. The reason the book does not tell us how Mike Mulligan went to the bathroom is that it is not an important part of the story. The story is about digging the basement of the town hall, and that is what the book tells us. Miss Benny spoke as if this explanation ended the matter, but the kindergarten was not convinced. Ramona knew, and the rest of the class knew, that knowing how to go to the bathroom was important. They were surprised that Miss Benny did not understand, because she had showed them the bathroom the very first thing. Ramona could see there were some things she was not going to learn in school, and along with the rest of the class, she stared reproachfully at Miss Benny. The teacher looked embarrassed, as if she knew she had disappointed her kindergarten. She recovered quickly, closed the book, and told the class that if they would walk quietly out to the playground, she would teach them a game called Grey Duck. Ramona did not budge. She watched the rest of the class leave the room and admired Susan's boing, boing curls as they bounced about her shoulders. But she did not stir from her seat. Only Miss Benny could unstick the imaginary glue that held her there. Don't you want to learn to play Grey Duck, Ramona? Miss Benny asked. Ramona nodded. Yes, but I can't. Why not? Asked Miss Benny. I can't leave my seat, said Ramona. When Miss Benny looked blank, she added, because of the present. What present? Miss Benny seemed so genuinely puzzled that Ramona became uneasy. The teacher sat down in the little chair next to Ramona's and said, Tell me why you can't play Grey Duck. Ramona squirmed, worn out with waiting. She had an uneasy feeling that something had gone wrong someplace. I want to play Grey Duck, but you... She stopped, feeling that she might be about to say the wrong thing. But I what? Asked Miss Benny. Well, you said if I sat here, I would get a present, said Ramona at last. But you didn't say how long I had to sit here. If Miss Benny had looked puzzled before, she now looked baffled. Ramona, I don't understand, she began. Yes, you did, said Ramona, nodding. You told me to sit here for the present, and I have been sitting here ever since school started, and you haven't given me a present. Miss Benny's face turned red, and she looked so embarrassed that Ramona felt completely confused. Teachers were not supposed to look that way. Miss Benny spoke gently. Ramona, I'm afraid we've had a misunderstanding. Ramona was blunt. You mean I don't get a present? I'm afraid not, admitted Miss Benny. You see, for the present means for now. I meant that I wanted you to sit here for now because later I may have the children sit at different desks. Oh. Ramona was so disappointed she had nothing to say. Words were so puzzling. Present should mean a present, just as attack should mean to stick tacks in people. By now, all the children were crowding around the door to see what had happened to their teacher. I'm so sorry, said Miss Benny. It's all my fault. I should have used different words. That's all right, said Ramona, ashamed to have the class see that she was not going to get a present after all. All right, class, said Miss Benny briskly. Let's go outside and play Grey Duck. You too, Ramona. Grey Duck turned out to be an easy game, and Ramona's spirits recovered quickly from her disappointment. The class formed a circle, and the person who was it tagged someone who had to chase them around the circle. If it was caught before they got back to the empty space in the circle, they had to go into the center of the circle, which was called the mush pot, and the person who caught them became it. Ramona tried to stand next to the girl with the springy curls, but instead she found herself beside Howie. I thought you were going to get a present, gloated Howie. Ramona merely scowled and made a face at Howie, who was it, but quickly landed in the mush pot because his new jeans were so stiff they slowed him down. Look at Howie in the mush pot, crowed Ramona. Howie looked as if he were about to cry, which Ramona thought was silly of him. Only a baby would cry in the mush pot. Me, somebody tag me, thought Ramona, jumping up and down. She longed for a turn to run around the circle. Susan was jumping up and down too, and her curls bobbed enticingly. At last, Ramona felt a tap on her shoulder. Her turn had come to run around the circle. She ran as fast as she could to catch up with the sneakers pounding on the asphalt ahead of her. The boing boing curls were on the other side of the circle. Ramona was coming closer to them. She put out her hand. She took hold of a curl, a thick, springy curl. Yow! Screamed the owner of the curls. Startled, Ramona let go. She was so surprised by the scream that she forgot to watch Susan's curl spring back. Susan clutched her curls with one hand and pointed at Ramona with the other. That girl pulled my hair! That girl pulled my hair! Ow, ow, ow! Ramona felt that Susan did not have to be so touchy. She had not meant to hurt her. She only wanted to touch that beautiful springy hair that was so different from her own straight brown hair. Ow, ow, ow! Shrieked Susan, the center of everyone's attention. Baby, said Ramona. Ramona, said Miss Binny, in our kindergarten we do not pull hair. Susan doesn't have to be such a baby, said Ramona. You may go sit on the bench outside the door while the rest of us play our game, Miss Binny told Ramona. Ramona did not want to sit on any bench. She wanted to play Grey Duck with the rest of the class. No, said Ramona, preparing to make a great big noisy fuss. I won't. Susan stopped shrieking. A terrible silence fell over the playground. Everyone stared at Ramona in such a way that she almost felt as if she were beginning to shrink. Nothing like this had ever happened to her before. Ramona, said Miss Binny quietly, go sit on the bench. Without another word, Ramona walked across the playground and sat down on the bench by the door of the kindergarten. The game of Grey Duck continued without her, but the class had not forgotten her. Howie grinned in her direction. Susan continued to look injured. Some laughed and pointed at Ramona. Others, particularly Davy, looked worried, as if they had not known such a terrible punishment could be given in kindergarten. Ramona swung her feet and pretended to be watching some work people who were building a new market across the street. In spite of the misunderstanding about the present, she wanted so much to be loved by her new teacher. Tears came into Ramona's eyes, but she would not cry. Nobody was going to call Ramona Quimby a crybaby. Never. Next door to the kindergarten, two little girls, about 2 and 4 years old, peered solemnly through the fence at Ramona. See that girl? Said the older girl to her little sister. She's sitting there because she's been bad. The 2-year-old looked awed to be in the presence of such wickedness. Ramona stared at the ground. She felt so ashamed. When the game ended, the class filed past Ramona into the kindergarten. You may come in now, Ramona, said Miss Binny pleasantly. Ramona slid off the bench and followed the others. Even though she was not loved, she was forgiven, and that helped. She hoped that learning to read and write came next. Instead, Miss Binny announced that the time had come to rest. This news was another disappointment to Ramona, who felt that anyone that went to kindergarten was too old to rest. Miss Binny gave each child a mat on which there was a picture that matched the picture on their cupboard door, and told them where to spread their mat on the floor. When all 29 children were lying down, they did not rest. They popped up to see what others were doing. They wiggled. They whispered. They coughed. They asked, How much longer do we have to rest? Shh, said Miss Binny in a soft, quiet, sleepy voice. The person who rests most quietly will get to be the wake-up fairy. What's the wake-up fairy? Demanded Howie, bobbing up. Shh, whispered Miss Binny. The wake-up fairy tiptoes around and wakes up the class with a magic wand. Whoever is the fairy wakes up the quietest resters first. Ramona made up her mind that she would get to be the wake-up fairy, and then Miss Binny would know she was not so bad after all. She lay flat on her back with her hands tight to her sides. The mat was thin, and the floor was hard, but Ramona did not wiggle. She was sure she must be the best rester in the class, because she could hear others squirming around on their mats. Just to show Miss Binny she really and truly was resting, she gave one little snore. Not a loud snore, but a delicate snore, to prove what a good rester she was. A scatter of giggles rose from the class, followed by several snores less delicate than Ramona's. They led to more and more, less and less delicate snores until everyone was snoring, except the few who did not know how to snore. They were giggling. Miss Binny clapped her hands and spoke in a voice that was no longer soft, quiet, or sleepy. "All right, children," she said. "This is enough. We do not snore or giggle during rest time." "Ramona started it," said Howie. Ramona sat up and scowled at Howie. "Tattletale," she said in a voice of scorn. Across Howie, she saw that Susan was lying quietly, with her beautiful curls spread out on her mat and her eyes screwed tight shut. "Well, you did," said Howie. "Children," Miss Finney's voice was sharp, "we must rest so that we will not be tired when our mothers come to take us home." "Is your mother coming to take you home?" Howie asked Miss Binny. Ramona had been wondering the same thing. "That's enough, Howie." Miss Binny spoke the way mothers sometimes speak just before dinner time. In a moment, she was back to her soft, sleepy voice. "I like the way Susan is resting so quietly," she said. "Susan, you may be the wake-up fairy and tap the boys and girls with this wand to wake them up." The magic wand turned out to be nothing but an everyday meter stick. Ramona lay quietly, but her efforts were of no use. Susan, with her curls bouncing about her shoulders, tapped Ramona last. It's not fair, Ramona thought. She was not the worst rester in the class. Howie was much worse. The rest of the morning went quickly. The class was allowed to explore the paints and the toys, and those who wanted to were allowed to draw with their new crayons. They did not, however, learn to read and write. But Ramona cheered up when Miss Binny explained that anyone who had anything to share with the class could bring it to school the next day for show and tell. Ramona was glad when the bell finally rang and she saw her mother waiting for her outside the fence. Mrs. Kemp and Willie Jean were waiting for Howie, too, and the five started home together. Right away, Howie said, "Ramona got benched, and she's the worst rester in the class." After all that had happened that morning, Ramona found this too much. "Why don't you shut up?" she yelled at Howie just before she hit him. Mrs. Quimby seized Ramona by the hand and dragged her away from Howie. "Now, Ramona," she said, and her voice was firm, "this is no way to behave on your first day of school." "Poor little girl," said Mrs. Kemp. "She's worn out." Nothing infuriated Ramona more than having a grown-up say, as if she could not hear, that she was worn out. "I'm not worn out!" she shrieked. "She got plenty of rest while she was benched," said Howie. "Now, Howie, you stay out of this," said Mrs. Kemp. Then, to change the subject, she asked her son, "How do you like kindergarten?" "Oh, I guess it's all right," said Howie without enthusiasm. "They don't have any dirt to dig in or tricycles to ride." "And what about you, Ramona?" asked Mrs. Quimby. "Did you like kindergarten?" Ramona considered. Kindergarten had not turned out as she had expected. Still, even though she had not been given a present and Miss Binny did not love her, she had liked being with boys and girls her own age. She liked singing the song about the Donzer and having her own little cupboard. "I didn't like it as much as I thought I would," she answered honestly. "But maybe it will get better when we have show and tell."